The image of pirates that most people have today is largely shaped by Hollywood movies, books, and popular culture. We often picture them as swashbuckling heroes, sailing the high seas in search of treasure, drinking rum, and fighting off enemy ships with a sword in hand. But how accurate is this portrayal? In reality, medieval pirates were far more complex, and often far less glamorous than the legends suggest. Pirates didn't wear fancy hats or walk the plank every day. They weren't always noble adventurers seeking riches. Many were desperate sailors pushed to the edge by harsh working conditions, low pay, and exploitation. Some turned to piracy out of necessity, while others saw it as a way to escape poverty or seek revenge against oppressive systems. Their lives were filled with danger, uncertainty, and constant risk. So, what was life really like for medieval pirates? How did they operate? What drove them to take such extreme measures? And why do we still romanticize them today? Let's dive into the hidden world of medieval piracy and uncover the facts behind the myths. Piracy wasn't born out of love for adventure or treasure. It was born out of desperation, opportunity, and the brutal realities of life at sea during the medieval era. For many, becoming a pirate was not a choice. It was a survival tactic. Sailors in the 16th and 17th centuries were often treated as expendable labor. They worked long hours under harsh conditions, with little pay and even less protection from abuse by ship captains. Food was scarce, water was foul, and disease ran rampant on long voyages. Many sailors were essentially indentured servants, bound to their contracts with no escape unless they fled. Governments and trading companies controlled most maritime activity, but enforcement was weak, especially far from port. This created opportunities for those willing to take risks. Some sailors mutinied against cruel officers, seized control of ships, and turned to piracy to escape their former lives. War also played a role. During times of conflict, privateers, licensed pirates who attacked enemy ships on behalf of their governments, were common. When wars ended, these men found themselves unemployed, with no skills except raiding and fighting. With no legitimate work available, many simply continued what they knew best, piracy. Others came from landlocked backgrounds. Farmers ruined by bad harvests, soldiers left without pensions after war, and even minor nobles stripped of titles all sought refuge at sea. The ocean offered danger, yes, but also the chance to rewrite one's fate. The promise of wealth was another draw. While Hollywood likes to exaggerate the riches pirates found, there were real fortunes to be made. A single successful raid could earn a crew more money than years of honest labor. For someone with nothing, that risk was worth taking. But perhaps the most surprising reason people became pirates was freedom. Pirate crews often operated with a level of democracy unheard of on land. Captains were elected, loot was shared, and every man had a voice. On a pirate ship, your past didn't matter. Only your skill and courage did. This combination of desperation, opportunity, and rebellion fueled the rise of piracy in the medieval world. And once a man, or woman, took that step, there was no turning back. Once you made the choice, or were forced to become a pirate, your life changed forever. Gone were the days of predictable routines, or even basic comforts. Life aboard a pirate ship was harsh, dangerous, and unforgiving. Imagine stepping onto a wooden vessel no larger than 100 feet long, packed with 60 to 100 men, all living shoulder to shoulder in tight quarters. There was no privacy, no fresh water for bathing, and certainly no luxury. Meals were simple, if they existed at all. Salted meat, hardtack biscuits, dried beans, and whatever fresh food could be stolen from captured ships. The biscuits were often infested with weevils, the meat tough enough to break your teeth, and the water, if it hadn't turned foul, tasted like rust and sweat. Sleep wasn't much better. Most pirates didn't have beds. They slept on the deck or in hammocks slung between barrels. When storms hit, water poured through the planks, soaking everything, including the crew. Disease spread quickly. Scurvy, dysentery, and infections from wounds were common. Without proper medicine, many died slow, agonizing deaths. Discipline was strict, but surprisingly fair compared to naval or merchant ships. Pirate crews operated under something called articles, essentially a code of conduct that every man agreed to before joining. These rules dictated how loot would be divided, what punishments would be given for theft or cowardice, and how disputes would be settled. Captains had authority, but not absolute power. If a captain became tyrannical or ineffective, the crew could vote to replace him, even maroon him on a deserted island. Pirates shared equally in the spoils, which was unheard of on regular ships, where officers took most of the profits. A successful raid could earn a pirate more in a few weeks than a sailor earned in years. But success was never guaranteed. Missions failed. Ships sank. Men were killed or captured. And if caught by authorities, execution was almost certain. Despite the dangers, some found a strange sense of freedom in piracy. On land, your birth determined your fate. At sea, skill, courage, and loyalty mattered most. For those who had nothing, even a life of crime offered a chance to control their own destiny. But make no mistake, piracy was not an easy escape. It was a gamble, one that could end in riches or ruin. Pirate leadership was a fascinating blend of democracy, necessity, and survival. Unlike the rigid hierarchies found on naval or merchant ships, pirate crews often operated like self-governed communities at sea. Captains were not born into power, nor were they appointed by distant rulers. They were elected by the crew. A captain's authority came from the consent of those who followed him. If he failed to lead effectively, if he showed cowardice in battle or abused his position, the crew could vote to remove him, even replace him with someone else. This wasn't just rare, it was revolutionary for the time. In an era when kings ruled by divine right and nobles inherited power regardless of merit, pirates created a system where only skill, courage, and fairness mattered. But make no mistake, captaincy was not a ceremonial role. The captain made tactical decisions during battles, directed navigation, and represented the crew in negotiations. He was expected to be bold, decisive, and fair. His word carried weight, but only as long as the crew respected him. To maintain order without chaos, pirate crews established written codes known as articles. These rules outlined everything from how loot would be divided to what punishments awaited theft, desertion, or cowardice. Some crews even had clauses ensuring fair treatment among members, including provisions that protected injured men from being abandoned. In many cases, quartermasters held equal or even greater power than captains. Elected separately, the quartermaster managed daily operations, enforced discipline, and acted as a check against any potential tyranny from the captain. If a disagreement arose between the two, the crew settled it through a vote. These systems weren't perfect, but compared to the brutal conditions on land or aboard government ships, they offered something radical: freedom and fairness. So while Hollywood may paint pirates as reckless rogues, the truth is far more intriguing. Pirate leadership was a delicate balance of power, trust, and mutual survival. An unexpected form of democracy floating on the open sea. Pirates didn't just sail aimlessly across the sea hoping to stumble upon a ship full of gold. They were cunning, strategic, and often relied more on fear than brute force. Their greatest weapon wasn't their cannons or cutlasses. It was psychological warfare. Pirates knew that most merchant crews had no desire to fight. Most sailors were poorly paid, overworked, and had little reason to risk their lives defending cargo that didn't belong to them. So pirates used this to their advantage. Before even engaging in battle, pirates would fly false flags, pretending to be friendly ships from a neutral country. As they got closer, they'd suddenly raise the Jolly Roger, sending waves of terror through their victims. The sight of the skull and crossbones was enough to make many crews surrender without a fight. After all, why risk death when you could simply hand over your goods and live? When intimidation alone wasn't enough, pirates relied on speed and surprise. Their ships were fast and maneuverable, designed for quick getaways after a raid. Unlike bulky naval vessels, pirate ships were built for agility, allowing them to chase down slower merchant ships or escape government warships when things went wrong. Once in range, pirates would fire warning shots, sometimes blanks or even stones, to scare the crew into submission. If resistance continued, they'd unleash a barrage of real cannon fire, aiming not to sink the ship, but to damage its ability to flee. Raking fire, firing along the length of the enemy deck, was especially effective, causing chaos among the crew and forcing them to surrender quickly. Boarding was the last resort, but when it happened, it was brutal. Pirates would swing aboard with grappling hooks, swords in hand, shouting terrifying war cries meant to break morale. Some pirates carried multiple pistols, firing one after another before drawing their blades. Others used grenades filled with shrapnel, early versions of hand-thrown explosives that could tear through wooden decks and scatter defenders. But violence was rarely necessary. Most pirate attacks ended before they began. And if a ship did resist, pirates made sure future crews knew about it. Stories of torture, executions, or forced walking the plank spread quickly, serving as warnings to any captain who might think of fighting back. Pirates also understood the value of intelligence. They listened to rumors in ports, bribed informants, and studied shipping routes. Some even maintained networks of spies who told them where valuable cargo ships would be sailing, and when they'd be least prepared for an attack. Their tactics weren't just about survival, they were about control. By striking fast, spreading fear, and keeping their enemies guessing, pirates ruled the seas, not by numbers but by reputation. The Golden Age of Piracy wasn't some mythical era of endless treasure and freedom. It was a brief but explosive period in history when piracy flourished under the perfect storm of war, weak law enforcement, and global trade expansion. It officially spanned from roughly 1650 to 1730, though its roots go back even further. This was a time when European powers like Britain, Spain, and France were expanding their empires across the Atlantic and into the Caribbean. These regions became hubs for commerce, and also for crime on the high seas. After wars ended, thousands of privateers, men who had been authorized by governments to attack enemy ships, found themselves without jobs. Many simply continued what they knew best, raiding ships, looting cargo, and surviving off stolen goods. With no navy hunting them down during peacetime, piracy exploded. Pirates thrived in places where law enforcement was nearly non-existent. The Caribbean, with its scattered islands and busy shipping lanes, became a pirate haven. Ports like Port Royal in Jamaica, Nassau in the Bahamas, and Tortuga near Hispaniola became known as pirate strongholds. Some were even controlled by pirates themselves, turning into lawless cities where stolen goods flowed freely and drunken revelry lasted for days. But piracy didn't last forever. By the early 18th century, European governments began cracking down hard. They passed stricter anti-piracy laws, deployed naval patrols, and offered pardons to pirates willing to give up their lives of crime. Those who refused faced swift justice. Hanging in public spectacles meant to scare others away. Some of the most infamous pirates emerged during this era. Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, struck fear into sailors with his long black beard and smoking fuses tucked beneath his hat. Bartholomew Roberts captured over 400 ships, more than any other pirate in history. And Bonnie and Mary Red, two female pirates who disguised themselves as men, fought fiercely alongside their crews and defied gender norms in one of the most male-dominated professions of the time. Despite their notoriety, these pirates lived short, dangerous lives. Most died violently, either executed after capture or killed in battle. Few ever amassed great riches, and even fewer escaped punishment. Still, the Golden Age of Piracy left a lasting legacy. It shaped maritime law, influenced naval tactics, and gave rise to countless myths that still captivate people today. So while the age itself may have ended, the legend of pirates continues to sail through our stories, movies, and imaginations. When we think of pirates, a few legendary names come to mind: Blackbeard and Bonnie, Bartholomew Roberts. But how much of their story is real, and how much has been exaggerated by centuries of storytelling? Let's start with the most iconic pirate of all time, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. He was feared across the Caribbean and Atlantic coast in the early 18th century. His reputation was built not just on his actions, but on the terrifying image he cultivated. He wore a long black beard woven in thick braids, often tucked with smoldering fuses that gave off smoke when he walked into battle. This wasn't just for show. It created an intimidating aura that made him look like a demon from hell. But contrary to popular belief, Blackbeard didn't kill many people. Most of his victims surrendered without a fight, terrified by his appearance alone. He captured ships through psychological warfare rather than brute force. In fact, there are no confirmed records of him killing anyone before his final battle. When he was finally cornered by British naval forces near North Carolina in 1718, he fought fiercely but was eventually shot 5 times and stabbed more than 20 times before collapsing. Then there's Bonnie, one of the few documented female pirates. She disguised herself as a man to join the crew of Calico Jack Rackham, a pirate known more for his flamboyant style than his success, and was fierce, skilled with a blade, and unafraid to challenge authority, even among hardened criminals. During a raid, she reportedly refused to hide below deck while the ship was under attack, instead fighting alongside the men. Her close friend and fellow pirate, Mary Red, also disguised herself as a man and joined Calico Jack's crew. Mary had spent her life pretending to be male, first to pass as her dead brother and later to serve in the military. Together, and Mary were said to be among the fiercest fighters aboard the ship. But their luck ran out in 1720 when they were captured by the British. Both women were sentenced to hang, but they avoided execution by claiming pregnancy, which delayed their punishment until after childbirth. There's no record of either woman ever being executed, and their fate remains one of history's great mysteries. Another infamous name is Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart. Unlike many pirates, Roberts was not a former sailor who turned rogue. He was forced into piracy when his ship was captured by pirates. Once aboard, he quickly rose through the ranks and became one of the most successful pirates in history. Over 4 years, he captured over 400 ships across the Atlantic, from the Caribbean to West Africa. Roberts was known for his strict code of conduct and his sense of pride. He despised drunkenness and required his crew to keep their weapons clean and ready at all times. He even banned gambling aboard his ship, fearing it would cause disputes. Yet, despite his discipline, he was still a pirate, and a deadly one at that. He was eventually killed in battle in 1722 when British warships ambushed his crew off the coast of West Africa. Many pirate legends grew larger than life after their deaths. Stories were exaggerated, myths were born, and Hollywood helped turn them into mythological figures. But behind every legend lies a real person, one who lived fast, died young, and left behind a legacy that continues to capture our imaginations. When pirates weren't sailing the open sea, they had to dock, whether to restock supplies, repair their ships, or simply enjoy a break from the endless horizon. These ports became pirate havens, places where law was loose and coin flowed freely. But life ashore wasn't just about drinking and revelry. It came with its own set of rules, dangers, and opportunities. Pirates needed safe places to trade stolen goods, and many port cities were more than happy to oblige. In places like Port Royal in Jamaica, Nassau in the Bahamas, and Tortuga near Hispaniola, merchants and local officials often turned a blind eye to piracy, as long as they got a cut of the profits. Some even formed alliances with pirate crews, supplying them with food, weapons, and repairs in exchange for shares of loot. These ports were chaotic and dangerous. Taverns overflowed with drunken sailors, gamblers, and thieves. Prostitutes roamed the streets, and fights broke out over money, women, or even a single insult. The air was thick with smoke, sweat, and the stench of unwashed bodies. But for pirates, it was home, if only for a short time. Despite the chaos, pirates followed an unspoken code when on land. Theft among crew members was strictly forbidden. Those caught stealing could be marooned or flogged. However, outside of the crew, anything went. Pirates spent their hard-earned loot quickly, often blowing entire fortunes in a single night of gambling, drinking, and excess. Some pirates invested in businesses or bought land, trying to settle down after years at sea. Others squandered everything and found themselves back on the hunt within days. There were even cases of pirates marrying into wealthy families, using their riches to buy legitimacy. But peace never lasted long. Authorities were always watching, and betrayal was common. A pirate who stayed too long in one place risked being recognized, arrested, or even executed. Many preferred to return to the sea before trouble found them. For those lucky enough to escape capture, these moments ashore were the closest thing to freedom they ever knew. A brief escape from the constant danger of battle, storms, and starvation. And yet, for all the noise and excitement, most pirates knew that their true world, their real home, was not on land, but on the open ocean. Piracy was not all treasure hunts and sea shanties. Beneath the surface of freedom and rebellion lay a brutal world where violence, betrayal, and cruelty were part of daily life. For many pirates, survival meant instilling fear. Brutality wasn't just a last resort. It was a tool used to control victims and enemies alike. Some pirates took pride in their reputation for torture, believing that if people feared them enough, they wouldn't dare resist. One of the most infamous methods pirates used was walking the plank. Though often dismissed as a Hollywood invention, historical records do confirm its use, though it was rare compared to other forms of punishment. More common were beatings, brandings, and forced labor under harsh conditions. Captured sailors who refused to join pirate crews could be whipped, marooned on deserted islands, or even killed. Marooning was one of the cruelest punishments a pirate could face. It involved being left alone on a remote island with little more than a bottle of water, some food, and perhaps a pistol with a single bullet. The message was clear: either survive on your own, or end it quickly. Some pirates did this as revenge. Others simply wanted to get rid of troublemakers without bloodshed. Torture was also used, not just against prisoners, but among pirate crews themselves. Disputes over loot, leadership, or personal grudges could escalate into violent confrontations. Some pirates believed in strict discipline, while others ruled through terror. In extreme cases, mutineers were tied to barrels and set adrift, or had their tongues cut out for spreading dissent. Even within the so-called democratic structure of pirate ships, justice was swift and unforgiving. Pirate codes outlined severe consequences for theft, cowardice, and desertion. A man caught stealing from his crew might be flogged, chained below deck, or thrown overboard. These rules weren't always fair, but they kept order in a world where chaos was only one fight away. The worst atrocities occurred during raids. Some pirate captains ordered their men to kill entire crews to avoid witnesses. Others burned ships with survivors still aboard. Torture was used to extract information. Where was the gold hidden? Which ports were undefended? Who would pay the highest ransom? But not all pirates were monsters. Many followed a code of conduct that protected their own men and sometimes even their captives. Some preferred negotiation over violence, knowing that a peaceful surrender meant more profit and fewer risks. Still, the line between survival and savagery was thin, and once crossed, there was no turning back. The dark side of piracy wasn't just about what pirates did to others. It was also about how they treated each other. Loyalty was valued above all else, but betrayal was punished severely. In a world where trust meant survival, breaking it could mean death. And yet, despite the brutality, many chose this life willingly. For some, the alternative, starvation, abuse, or execution under the law, was worse. On land, power belonged to kings and nobles. At sea, it belonged to those willing to take it. Pirates weren't just criminals of the sea. They were a subculture with their own language, customs, and beliefs that set them apart from the rest of society. From the slang they used to the rituals they followed, pirates developed a unique identity that bound them together in a world where trust was rare and betrayal common. One of the most recognizable parts of pirate culture was their speech. Phrases like "ar ahoy" and "avast" were more than just colorful expressions. They were part of a shared vocabulary that helped pirates communicate quickly and clearly, especially during battles or negotiations. Some words had specific meanings. "I" meant agreement, very different from "I'm meaning yes today." "Matey" referred to fellow crew members, showing camaraderie. "Dead men tell no tales" wasn't just a saying. It was a warning before someone was killed to keep secrets buried. Beyond language, pirates followed strange but practical customs. One of the most well-known was the belief that whistling at sea could summon storms. Sailors avoided it unless they wanted to bring bad luck upon themselves. Another superstition held that red-haired crew members brought misfortune. Some captains refused to let them aboard. Even the way pirates dressed carried hidden meanings. Wearing bright colors wasn't just about looking intimidating. It helped identify injured pirates on a battlefield. Blood didn't show as easily on dark clothing, and some pirates wore redcoats, so wounds wouldn't be immediately visible to enemies. Tattoos were also common among pirates. Anchors, ships, and swallows were popular designs, often symbolizing experience, survival, or long journeys. A tattoo of a compass rose might indicate navigation skills, while a woman's name inked on the arm showed loyalty or regret after a few too many drinks. Gambling was another staple of pirate life. With long stretches of time between raids, dice games and card games were common pastimes. Some crews even had formal gambling rules written into their pirate articles. But cheating was one of the worst offenses, punishable by marooning or worse. Music played an important role in pirate culture, too. Sea shanties weren't just for rowing. They lifted morale, passed down stories, and gave rhythm to daily tasks. Songs like 15 Men on the Dead Man's Chest became legends, sung around campfires in port towns across the Caribbean. But perhaps the most powerful force in pirate life was belief. Superstitions ruled everything from how they sailed to who they trusted. Pirates believed in omens. A bird flying overhead meant good fortune, while a shark following the ship was a sign of death. Some carried lucky charms, like pieces of gold, bones, or even teeth, to ward off evil spirits. These traditions, strange as they may seem, helped pirates survive in a dangerous world. In a life full of uncertainty, these customs offered structure, identity, and a sense of control, even if only in their minds. When most people think of pirates, one image immediately comes to mind: buried treasure, a map marked with an X, and the promise of untold riches. But how much of that is based in reality, and how much is pure myth? The truth might surprise you. While pirates did steal vast amounts of wealth, the idea of burying chests full of gold beneath palm trees was extremely rare. In fact, there are only a handful of documented cases where pirates actually buried their loot, and even fewer where it was ever recovered. One of the most famous examples is Captain William Kidd, a privateer turned pirate who supposedly buried some of his stolen riches before being captured and executed in 1701. Some of his treasure was later found on Gardiner's Island off the coast of New York, but much of it remains missing, fueling centuries of speculation and treasure hunts. Another legendary tale involves Thomas II, known as the Rhode Island pirate, who reportedly left behind caches of gold in hidden coves along the African coast. However, unlike the stories told in taverns and books, most pirates didn't have the luxury of hiding their loot for future use. They spent it quickly. Why? Because pirate life was short, unpredictable, and filled with danger. Most pirates lived day to day, spending their share of plundered goods as soon as they could. Gold and silver were valuable, yes, but so were everyday items like food, alcohol, clothing, and weapons. A pirate who survived long enough to accumulate real wealth often invested in land, bribes, or a new identity instead of stashing it away. Some pirates even preferred trade over treasure. Stolen ships, spices, textiles, and even slaves were sometimes more valuable than gold. Captured cargo could be sold in black market ports like Nassau or Tortuga, where merchants were happy to buy stolen goods at a discount. So what about maps, codes, and secret islands? That part, too, was largely exaggerated. While pirates did keep records of where they had raided or traded, these weren't the elaborate, cryptic clues seen in novels. Most were simple notes written in journals or passed orally between crew members. But perhaps the greatest myth of all is the idea of the lost treasure. Thousands of expeditions have been launched over the centuries, from Oak Island in Canada to remote Caribbean atolls, all chasing rumors of pirate gold. Yet, despite the countless hours, money, and effort poured into these searches, very little has ever been found. What does exist is often not pirate-related at all. Many supposed pirate treasures turn out to be remnants of sunken Spanish galleons or colonial trade ships. Still, the legend persists. And maybe that's the point. The idea of pirate treasure isn't just about gold. It's about adventure, mystery, and the thrill of discovery. Whether real or imagined, the myth of buried treasure continues to capture our imaginations, keeping the spirit of piracy alive long after the last Jolly Roger flew. For all their freedom and defiance, pirates could not escape the inevitable tide of law and order. By the early 18th century, piracy had become a serious threat to global trade, and European powers decided it was time to end the Golden Age once and for all. The turning point came in 1718, when Britain declared open war on piracy with the passage of the Piracy Act. This law removed many of the legal protections that pirates had previously used to avoid prosecution. Captains no longer needed to bring pirates back to England for trial. Now, they could be tried and executed on the spot in colonial courts. Governments also began enforcing stricter naval patrols across the Caribbean and Atlantic. Ships like the HMS Scarborough and HMS Pearl were deployed specifically to hunt down pirate strongholds. These warships were faster, better armed, and crewed by disciplined sailors who did not fear pirates as merchant crews often did. One of the most effective strategies was the use of amnesties. In 1718, King George I issued a royal proclamation offering full pardons to any pirate who surrendered and renounced their criminal life. Many took the offer, especially those tired of constant danger and short-lived riches. Some even became informants, helping authorities track down former comrades in exchange for safety. But not all pirates accepted peace. Those who refused to surrender found themselves hunted with ruthless efficiency. Blackbeard's final stand in November 1718 was a brutal example of how seriously the British now treated piracy. Cornered near Ocracoke Inlet in North Carolina, Blackbeard fought fiercely against Lieutenant Robert Maynard and his men. The battle ended with Blackbeard being shot 5 times and stabbed more than 20 before finally falling dead on the deck of his own ship. Other famous pirates met similarly grim fates. Charles Vane was captured off the coast of Jamaica and hanged in 1721. Calico Jack Rackham was sentenced to death after being betrayed by Anne Bonny and Mary Red, both of whom avoided execution by claiming pregnancy. Bartholomew Roberts, one of history's most successful pirates, was killed in a naval battle off the coast of West Africa in 1722. His death marked the symbolic end of the Golden Age. By the 1730s, piracy had largely been wiped out from the Caribbean and Atlantic. Remaining pirates either fled to remote corners of the world or disappeared into obscurity. Governments maintained tight control over maritime trade, and ports that once harbored pirates were brought under strict regulation. The age of lawless adventure was over. What remained were stories, some true, many exaggerated, that would live on in books, songs, and films for centuries to come. Though the Golden Age of piracy ended over 300 years ago, pirates never truly disappeared from our world. Their influence lingers, not in the form of lawless sea raiders, but in language, culture, and even modern institutions. One of the most lasting impacts of piracy is found in naval law and maritime customs. Many of the rules pirates followed aboard their ships, like shared decision-making, fair loot distribution, and written codes of conduct, were surprisingly ahead of their time. Some historians argue that these early forms of self-governance influenced the development of democratic principles in seafaring communities and even inspired later labor unions. Pirates also left a mark on language and slang. Words like "I, matey," "yo-ho-ho," and phrases such as "dead men tell no tales" or "shiver me timbers" originated during the Golden Age and have become part of everyday speech, especially in entertainment and storytelling. Even the word swashbuckler, used to describe daring adventurers, comes from the pirate tradition of loudly slashing swords and stomping boots to intimidate enemies. In literature and film, pirates became larger-than-life figures. From Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island to Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, they've evolved into cultural icons, sometimes heroic, sometimes monstrous, always fascinating. These stories may be fictional, but they keep the spirit of piracy alive in popular imagination. Even fashion has borrowed from pirate life. The bandana, eye patch, earrings, and long coats worn by pirates have cycled through trends in both high fashion and subcultures. Rock musicians, gothic artists, and steampunk enthusiasts often adopt pirate-inspired looks as a symbol of rebellion and adventure. Beyond culture, pirates shaped geography and trade. Some of the ports they once controlled, like Port Royal in Jamaica and Nassau in the Bahamas, still carry echoes of their past. These places were among the first examples of global black markets, where goods from all over the world changed hands outside official control. In many ways, pirates helped establish the concept of international smuggling networks. Perhaps one of the most ironic legacies of piracy is how it led to stronger legal systems at sea. Governments realized that unchecked crime on the oceans threatened commerce and national security. As a result, they created more structured naval enforcement and maritime laws that still exist today. Modern anti-piracy operations off the coast of Somalia, for example, are built on centuries-old strategies developed to combat pirates like Blackbeard and Bartholomew Roberts. And let's not forget the economic impact. Pirate-themed attractions, movies, books, and merchandise generate billions of dollars annually. Theme parks like Disney World feature pirate-themed rides that draw millions of visitors each year. Halloween costumes, toys, and even cruise lines use pirate imagery to sell adventure and fantasy. But perhaps the greatest legacy of pirates is freedom, or at least the idea of it. Pirates lived outside the rigid social structures of their time. They offered a world where birth didn't dictate destiny, where loyalty mattered more than class, and where a man or woman could carve their own fate with a sword in hand and the wind at their back. That dream of freedom, of escape, of living beyond the rules, that's what keeps pirates sailing through our stories, songs, and imaginations, long after their real-world counterparts vanished beneath the waves. Pirates were not just criminals of the sea. They were rebels, survivors, and storytellers wrapped in myth. Their real lives were filled with danger, hardship, and moments of brutal reality that Hollywood rarely shows. The pirates we imagine today, swashbuckling heroes with witty lines and romanticized freedom, are far removed from the truth. In reality, most pirates lived short, violent lives, driven by desperation rather than dreams of gold. They came from all walks of life. Former sailors, escaped slaves, soldiers without pay, nobles without titles. Some found a twisted sense of justice aboard pirate ships, where men could rise by merit, not birth. Others simply wanted to escape the rigid rules of landbound society. But make no mistake, piracy was not a noble profession. It was dangerous, dirty, and often deadly. Disease, starvation, betrayal, and execution were constant threats. For every pirate who struck it rich, hundreds died unknown, their names lost to time and tide. Yet, despite the brutality, something about piracy continues to capture our imagination. Maybe it's the idea of living outside the law, of forging your own destiny on the open sea. Or maybe it's the stories, the legends passed down through generations, that keep us coming back to these rogues of history. Pirates remind us that the past wasn't always glamorous or heroic. It was messy, unpredictable, and full of people trying to survive however they could. And sometimes, that struggle makes for the best stories of all. So the next time you watch a pirate movie or read a tale of buried treasure, remember the real story behind the myths. Because beneath the fiction lies a world of adventure, danger, and humanity, just like ours, only rougher around the edges. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden world of medieval pirates, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. There's more history waiting to be uncovered. And trust me, some of it is even darker than piracy.